Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Singh.
All right.
Okay, so I think we can get started. And as we said, my name is Pip Campbell, and today with me is a whole group of people from North Carolina. We all work together as a team on this STEMI project. We have a lot of information to share with you today about how you can use adaptations to routines and activities so that you can incorporate STEM. So particularly this is aimed at people who work with infants and toddlers, but certainly the information that is included in here is information that is pertinent to what families could do in working with their young children. We also have an emphasis on children who are enrolled in early intervention programs, children who have IFSPs. And those of you who may be on this webinar who work in early intervention know that that can be a whole range of abilities that children have and a whole range of disabilities that children might have. So we'll be looking at children in different situations as we go through this workshop. So there are different times when we're going to kind of ask you to either use the reaction button, which is way over on the right-hand side, and you can do a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And we are also going to be using some polls, which you'll see is on your bottom bar over on the left-hand side, about the third one in. And there are many opportunities throughout this where we hope that you will type in the chat box either responses to things, reflections that about what's going on in the workshop, as well as what you might have as questions or other information that you might need. So I think we'll get started, and we're having a little bit of technical issues here, so hopefully this won't be too bad. Okay, so at the end of this very introductory webinar, we hope that you will be able to, or at least be able to think about ways in which you can embed opportunities for STEM foundational skill learning into everyday activities and routines. What you need to do, or what parents need to do, what adults need to do to verbally facilitate and guide this learning, how you consider using adaptations to access children to these routines and activities, also to be able to promote their participation. And then the final little part is, if you are an early intervention person, or if you're a person who works in childcare with infants and toddlers, you know, what is it that you can do to help childcare people be able to help parents be able to assist kids in having more opportunities for STEM learning. So there are 4 key components to this, and these are really, I would call them the take-home messages. They're the 4 things that you just need to be able to remember and need to be able to share with parents and other caregivers so that they can remember these 4 components. And they are basically either use a naturally occurring activity or to create one, to embed STEM foundational learning concepts. So these are things that many of you might recognize as sometimes called sensory motor skills, or sometimes called cognitive skills, which are concepts like use tool or cause and effect or object permanence, those sorts of things. And then also what you need to do, or what can be done to through adaptations to actually access children to the learning opportunity. Sometimes kids can't participate because they can't access it, the activity at all. And then the second part of that is to be able to think about what you can do to use adaptations to materials or use adaptations to instruction in order for children to be able to participate. And then the final piece of it is what adults need to do to talk to children about what's going on and what they're experiencing. Because the interesting thing about STEM and babies is that many infants and toddlers cannot talk that well yet. In fact, most infants and toddlers cannot talk that well yet, well enough to explain to you in great detail, you know, what they're experiencing or what they're learning. The second part is that some children who have delayed development or who may have actual disabilities like cerebral palsy are really unable to move, so they can't really show you what it is that they're learning. So we have to be sure that we can illustrate for children the kinds of topics that are going on. And so we'll talk about this facilitation and guidance as we go through. Okay, so let me start out by showing you a video of a little boy who has fairly severe motor disabilities, and you'll be able to see what he can do with blocks. Whoops, sorry. Well, I guess this is only going forward, so maybe you're not going to see what he can do with blocks. Ching, I don't know. How can I go backwards? Nope. Oh, I did get backwards. Okay. All right. So now we'll see about, there we go. Okay. See if I can start this video, maybe not. Nope. All right, so I don't know how this is going to work. I am so sorry.
I have a suggestion. This is Emine, by the way, from Turkey. If you have the video on your computer, you may just try to start the one on your computer, not the one uploaded to the PowerPoint slides. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Okay, Pip, I can control it. Why don't I turn it on?
All right, so why don't we just do that?
Okay.
Okay, so if you could show this video of this little boy, and he's doing a block activity, which is an activity that's often part of many, many different STEM activities. And in particular is something that children often engage with blocks and begin to be builders and engineers. So if you can show the video, that would be great.
Oh, it fell off the tray. Whoop.
I see 2 blocks. The green is going inside the yellow.
He is so focused. I think the green block is gonna fall inside of the yellow. What do you think? Why? Because it's a green box. It's smaller. Because it's 7 and the other one's 8. Tricky. You want to put it in? Boing. Uh-oh. Where did the green block go? It's inside the yellow block. Should we dump it out?
Okay, so on the next slide, you can see that if we apply this process that we were talking about earlier, they're taking advantage of a naturally occurring activity, which in this case happens to be play. As you can see with this little boy, the adaptations that are being used are he has a special chair and a tray that allows access. And then he has these large lightweight blocks that allow him to physically interact with the blocks but he's still unable to really hold them or grasp them or whatever. But he does have an opportunity through this activity to begin to learn some concepts about spatial awareness. So the third step is to think about what the adults are saying, and then think about what they might say. So in this particular situation, the adults are talking a lot about these different concepts, inside, outside, etc. But there really is no opportunity for this little boy, who obviously has some pretty significant delays. There's no really ability for him to be able to actually manipulate anything. I mean, he can move those blocks back and forth, but he can't really pick them up and put one on top of another. So the adults need to kind of narrate for him what's going on. So let's think about some observations about this particular situation. And you can use the reactions block way over on the right-hand side of your bottom screen. And then talk about, let's think about, what would you say about the child's access to the actual activity? Was his access good or not good? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Yes. Thumbs up. I can see it visually with some people. And unfortunately, I can't see the thumbs up and thumbs down on the if people are using the other one, but you can use it visually. You can just say it. So what about his ability to participate in the activity? Would you say it was optimal, not so optimal? Would you make changes? Would you say thumbs up or thumbs down? And I don't know. Christine, can you see what people are saying?
Yes, I was just going to say, someone suggested that he's moving his arms a bit to manipulate the blocks. A couple of other people said maybe make some changes to what was going on.
There maybe could be some changes. What would be some examples of changes? Anybody have a thought that they could put in the chat?
Oh, somebody said there's no thumbs down button, so that's why people were not responding that way. Okay. Smaller blocks to put in his hands. Someone else suggested smaller blocks.
Okay.
Different sized blocks. Hand over hand help. A partner. There's some more suggestions for hand over hand.
Right.
Someone thought maybe a different position, holding the baby in their lap, and then they could manipulate them together. So maybe moving his position where he was.
Right. So I think with children like this who have significant motor problems or significant motor issues, this little boy can move his arms. We don't know how well he can grasp and release. At this moment, he actually has splints on. But oftentimes, I think when we have this kind of a situation, we immediately revert to thinking about giving him physical help. So doing like hand over hand or doing other things, whereas our first goal often should be thinking about what can we do with the materials, or how can we change things, whether it's his position or whatever, that would allow him to participate. So those are all good ideas and certainly things that we would think about. So next slide. All right, so the first step of all of this is thinking about the activities and routines into which to embed STEM learning opportunities. So these are pretty simple, and many of you who work with families will already know about how to do these things. We want to ask parents what their children like to do. We want to give parents a few choices so that they could pick, like, would they rather do this while they're riding in the car, or do they think they could do this easier if they were playing outside? We can also use a formal activity routine checklist. And those of you who are in early intervention probably have one that you use already or know about one. There are many that are.
Zoom can be problematic like this, can it? Oh, I'm still not getting sound.
I'm sorry.
What's happening? See, it's showing up.
Looks like it's still loading on my screen.
Oh my gosh. I don't know why I wouldn't be strong enough.
Okay, so maybe everybody should mute themselves. Okay, so anyway, so let's, there's probably other ideas and other activities, ways that you guys have of finding out what activities and routines parents would want to think about embedding this in, or what activities and routines you would want to think about embedding it in. As a whole, I think people revert to playing, manipulating materials or doing that kind of playtime thing for STEM, but there's many, many other possibilities. So let's see the next slide. Okay, so let's look at this baby in the bathtub. So this is a water activity. This is a really good kind of a STEM activity. Blocks and water and are often good activities. So let's see what happens in this, and then think again about the routine or activity. Obviously is bath time. Think about the adaptations, and then think about what the adult might say.
Where's Justin? Boo! Where's Justin? Justin! Boo! Justin! Boo! Where is he? Boo! There you are. Justin! Peekaboo! Peekaboo, Justin, where are you? Boo! Hey! Get up. You're not gonna let Mom in? Hello? Hello? Hi!
Okay, so this is a whole routine obviously with bath time, and then with getting dressed, and then afterwards in this little play activity. So think about these three things, about what you observe for adaptations, what you think about for participating in the activity, and what you think during bath time in particular, what would be some of the things the mom could say, and then especially what kinds of things is this child learning? So next slide. All right, so if we apply this process, we can see that bath time is going well. Hopefully you can see that what's happening here is that foundational concepts such as cause and effect, this child's learning dump, volume, fill, mixing things, potentially what temperature are in the particular bath time activity. And then for adaptations, it's the inflatable bath insert in the tub, allows the child to sit and move their arms. And then they have toys of various sizes and weights. And what do you think, what do you think for this bath time part? What do you think are some of the things that the adult might say? What might the adult be saying to the child about STEM concepts while the child is in the bathtub? And you can type some of those things if you have ideas in the chat box. Yeah.
Narrate the child's activities.
That would be a great one. That's a good place to start. And if some of you know early language development, probably many of you do, You'll recognize this as what's often called descriptive talking. So what are some particular words? Cat, animal. Yes.
Talking about temperature. Ooh, water is warm when the baby is in the bathtub. Relating patterns with the toys. Pointing out which toys float and sink.
Right.
Point out when he moves his arms that the toys go up and down in the water. So cause and effect. Talk about the color of the fish. Talk about the water, warm and cool. Mom can describe what the baby does. You are happy. Try moving different body parts. I think I got them all. Let me see. I think
Yeah,
there's
so
one that I
those are all great ideas, and those are absolutely right on target. Talking about what's happening, what's going on. Secondarily, making sure that you infuse particular vocabulary words, like it could be color, or it could be things like splash, or it could be words that are associated with water. So beginning to introduce the child to that kind of vocabulary. And then a third component that we often think about, but which you don't hear on this video, but you may on some others, but one that we often don't even hear that much of is setting up a situation so that the child can think about problem solving. So for example, I wonder what would happen if you did this instead of that, or I wonder what would happen if the blue container, the blue whatever cup holds more than the yellow cup. And you're not expecting in those instances for the child to particularly be able to answer, but you're setting up kind of problem situations where the child can begin to reflect on, think about what might come next. So next slide. We're going to look at another one. You can just, this is a little child, this is about an 18-month-old, and you can play this video.
How do you drippy drop, Amelia?
You got some? You can get more?
Drip drop, drip drop.
How do you get your hands clean?
Sitting in the creek.
Want to show Dada how you make a splash?
Nice.
Okay, so we're going to go through, think about the same thing again, is that what is the circumstance? So this is a water activity, but now it's being done, this family is out by a creek. So now it's being done in a creek. You think about, you can see that this little girl imitates her mom by trying to do the same thing, get some sand and try to drippy drop it. And she does a little bit. And the dad is pretty good at being able to think about and narrate kind of what's going on in pretty simple language, which is generally what we would see as appropriate. So next slide. We can think about another kind of an activity that occurs when we think about STEM, and that's one of experiencing patterns. So experiencing patterns is usually something that we would think about children actually being able to do probably when they're more 2 years of age or in there, and have pretty good motor skills. And this is an example of a way that this could be done when you're doing it during a snack time. So here would be, instead of focusing on concepts that are related to water, whether it's in the bathtub or whether it's at a creek or whether it's blocks, this is a way of being able to begin to think about patterns and how children learn about patterns, which is another important, what we call cross-cutting concept in STEM. So next slide. Okay, so let's look at this. This is kind of the fourth thing that we're wanting to emphasize.
You have 2. Mama. I see 2. You gonna eat them one up? Oh. Now just one. So good. Now there's none. Oh, there's more.
Okay, so this is the fourth kind of cross-cutting concept that we think about within STEM. This obviously illustrates the M part of STEM, which is more of the math. And we've looked at some examples of S for science, and we've looked at T for technology and E for engineering. So these are all the foundational kinds of activities and ways in which children, infants and toddlers begin to learn concepts that will later be able to provide the foundation for STEM learning. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what are these foundations? Many of you probably are aware of these kinds of skills. As I said in the beginning, they're skills that we really think about in terms of being called sensory motor from a Piagetian standpoint, or being ones that we think about as being part of cognition. But the critical ones that you see embedded in STEM, or you see that are the foundations to STEM, are ones like using a tool to obtain something. So what's usually called means end. We see that children learn a lot about causality, or what's often called cause and effect, which is basically using a particular action to get a particular effect. And then children learn a lot about spatial relationships, the relationship of one object to another. As you saw with the little boy in the beginning of the blocks are, this block is inside versus outside. But there are other kinds of cognitive things that occur during infancy and toddlerhood, really up to like 18 months, 2 years of age in that age range. And we're talking really about children knowing that objects exist when they visually disappeared. So clearly for any kind of background to anything STEM-wise, kids have to have some sort of idea of object permanence. Obviously, the tool use, as I mentioned before, you've seen vocal imitation and gestural imitation, which are ways children learn things in general by what's heard or repeating physical actions, and then causality and spatial relationships. So the last one of these, I think usually in working with infants and toddlers, people frequently see the schemes for relating to objects as being whether or not kids have good fine motor skills, whether they can reach, whether they can grasp, whether they can use a pinch or grasp, whether they use a whole hand grasp, whether they can release objects, all of those sorts of things that we would definitely see on developmental scales. But in this Piagetian sense, it really is talking about the extent to which kids can use their hands and relate the size of their hand, the shape of their hand to what the object is that's going to be manipulated. So obviously the little girl that's at the side of the creek has to use very fine kind of what we would call pincher grasp, but she has to use a very small grasp in order to be able to imitate her mom and do the drippy drop. Whereas children in the bathtub, for example, can use kind of a more global sort of a way of interacting with objects. So this becomes an important thing because as kids get older, they learn to be like we are as adults, which is to sort of adjust your hand without even in thinking about it, to in relationship to the object that you're going to manipulate. So for example, if we're going to pick up a cup, we don't pick it up like this with our fingers and a pinch or grasp. We're more likely to readjust our hand so it's to the side, and we pick up the cup this way with more of a whole hand grasp, or maybe a small pinch or grasp if the cup has a handle. We also adjust not just for size or configuration of the object, but we also adjust for things like how heavy the object is, how light it is, what we're going to do with the object, etc. And these are skills that kids learn over the first couple of years, and are not necessarily concepts that underlie specifically are foundational to STEM, but they are skills that are needed for children to be able to manipulate objects. So we want to think about all these things with infants and toddlers, and think about that as creating opportunities for children to learn tool use, to learn cause and effect, and to learn spatial relationships in particular. Okay, next slide. All right, so if you think about this, and I just put this up here, not that we're going to fill it out because we aren't, but you can make a chart and you can begin to see that some things are more likely to be learned within the context of one kind of an activity than another kind of an activity. And you could actually use this matrix and sort of fill it out if you wanted to think yourself about how many opportunities you're creating are being created in a water activity for the child to learn means end, or for the child to learn spatial awareness, and begin to think about how many of these basic foundational skills can be embedded in this particular instance, in these cross-cutting concepts activities, although there are many other STEM activities that this would also apply to. All right, next slide. Okay, so that's the first part, is thinking about activities and routines and what kinds of STEM foundational concepts are being embedded. And in this particular case, thinking specifically about blocks as being an opportunity to learn or demonstrate engineering concepts, or thinking about water as being a way of learning volume, and all these other kinds of things. But in order for many children, particularly children with IFSPs, to be able to participate, we have to think about adaptations. So here's a poll with 3 kinds of responses, A, B, and C, and choose the response that best reflects your perspective. A is that children with disabilities and delays can participate in STEM as long as they can reach and grasp and manipulate materials. Infants and toddlers with disabilities or delays are less likely to do this do STEM because they have delays in cognitive and language skills. And in spite of disabilities or delays, everybody is able to learn STEM foundational concepts, vocabulary, and problem solving when they have access to situations in which they are able to engage. So let's see what people pick. Great, it looks like most people, I don't know, we're probably done with the poll. Are we done? It looks like most people are definitely looking at the last one, which is really the maybe best answer. Although many people believe, or we believe they believe, that STEM doesn't apply to infants and toddlers. You're obviously not members of those groups. And other people talk about myths that babies can't even do STEM, or they talk about myths, children with disabilities can't do STEM because they're not cognitively capable enough of doing it yet, or they don't have enough language. So So I guess I'm going to stop sharing these results. And you can see that the majority answered with this third one. So if you can go to the next slide. All right, you can see that this is absolutely what we would believe, that in spite of disabilities, all infants and toddlers can do this as long as we are able to. And Patricia, I think you're absolutely right. A lot of early intervention providers provide lots of STEM activities and don't even know particularly that they're doing it. So it's important to think about what really makes a play activity with blocks or water or whatever it is. What really makes that STEM is the way in which the adult provides the descriptive talking and creates situations for children that kind of what we would call it in early childhood, obviously, is scaffold, what kind of introduces new sorts of possibilities to children, because children are not necessarily going to discover that one block is on top of another. They might discover that, but they might not know the language associated with it on top of, unless an adult is there to point these kinds of things out. So next slide. All right, so the first thing that we want to think about with adaptations, because it's adaptations that really are what helps everybody be able to participate. So all children with disabilities, all typical children, all little children or whatever, can participate in an activity as long as they can access it. So here you see a picture of a little boy who is playing at the sink in the kitchen. And this little boy can't stand so well, but even if he could stand, he isn't going to be able to reach the sink. So he has like a stander that he's using. Many of you have probably seen these wooden box kind of standers that many families use for children to be able to stand and reach various things that are adult size. Okay, next slide. So that's helping him access the activity. All right, here you see babies that are being able to access the activity because one, they're on their stomachs, so they don't have to sit and balance and whatever. One is being held on her stomach, supported with the boppy, and she's able to play with water. This is a situation where water is a play activity and not in the bathtub or in the kitchen sink, which we would call embedded in activities and routines. So parents naturally wash dishes, their kids always have to take baths. This is a particular activity that has been set up for children to be able to play with water, in this case, babies. And what accesses them is the position and the support of pillows and a boppy. Okay, next slide. All right, here you see some other examples of things that access children to be able to do bath time, or to be able to, in the case of the little boy up at the top, he's in a floaty so that he can be in the swimming pool. And this allows him to play with water and be able to interact with water while he's within the context of an activity swimming. And the two bottom kids are in the context of an activity bath time. Okay, next slide. All right, here you see Jakey again, and you can see the adaptations that are allowing him to participate. One of which obviously is that he's sitting in this specially designed chair. What other adaptations are allowing him to participate? How have the materials been adapted?
Bigger tray, putting it right on the tray, something that's edible, hand over hand.
Right. So he's able to, hand over hand is, she's able to help him be able to interact with these materials. We know already from just that earlier picture that we saw of him that he is unable to grasp really easily or well. So grasping objects is maybe not a strength of his, but he can interact in this case here because he doesn't have to grasp anything. And the activity has been modified so that it matches what his abilities are from a motor standpoint, which is very important. Okay, next slide. All right, so what we're talking about here is oftentimes we don't just need to adapt for the child's position or give them chairs or do special kinds of standing boxes or whatever to access them to the activity. Once they are accessed to the activity, we also have to think about materials. And the materials have to be things that children are able to interact with. So this little baby, this little young child is interacting with water by having an object that the child is able to grasp, this yellow bucket. Okay, next slide. All right, here you see Jakey again. And now he has water that is in it has tipped out of a container, and it has a lot of bubbles stuff on it. And he's able to move there his hands. He can dump it somewhat grossly. And now he's able to make these particular vehicles, the car and the truck, etc., move in this water. So this is a way of thinking about, it's not just having the water, but also having objects he doesn't have to grasp, but that he can move by pushing them. Okay, next slide. All right, so we talked about way in the beginning with blocks, and blocks are usually pretty easy because blocks already come in any number of sizes. Some of you suggested way in the beginning for Jake that you would use little blocks instead of those great big blocks that he has. And that would be a modification as you see here. Slide. Yes, blocks made of sponges are a great idea. Next slide. Okay, so here you see different ways of being able to build things, and think about the fact that it doesn't always have to be exact blocks. It can be, as this little girl is on the left-hand side and she's manipulating cans to be able to stack them. On the right-hand side, you see a child using Legos. And as someone just mentioned, there are just not hundreds, probably 100 though, different kinds of blocks that you can use. They can be big blocks, little blocks, they can be heavy blocks, they can be light blocks, they can be made of cardboard, they can be made of wood. They can be they can go together like Legos do, or they can go together like sticky blocks do. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can think about what are the materials that would allow a child to be able to participate in something like, and learn the concepts of not just on top of, but being able to build things out of an object. Okay, next slide. All right, and here you see some other ways of doing this. These are blocks that are very thin, and you build a building out of them. So these are even more complicated than just regular ordinary blocks. Next slide. And here you see this little boy again, and where they are getting him to begin to learn some of these concepts of on top of and around by using what I think is a great idea of a modification, which is a muffin tin turned upside down. And he has these rings that he can get on top of the muffin. So he can actually begin to do stacking in a way that works for him. Yes, it is always good to see him smiling. So this is an activity, obviously, that he is enjoying, and one that is fun for him. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is an example of a movie. I think it's a movie. It was a movie. Yes, okay. Can you play that? Yeah.
Jess, which side's heavier? Ooh, look. Now they're the same. Now they're the same. Now this side's heavier. This side's heavier, Jess. Heavy. Good job. Try putting it in the other side. Wow, look at the scale. Now this side's heavier. Watch. This side's so heavy. Don't eat it. Can you put it over here? Jess, look how heavy this side is. This side's heavy. This side's light.
No.
Okay, so with this child, you can see that he has an activity, and his mom is really basically narrating this, and she's also creating these verbal examples where she's labeling things. She's labeling kind of what's the outcome of what he's doing, and she's also presenting him with different problems, like what if he would put it over here, or what if he would put it over there. So this is the kind of thing that we think about often in terms of the STEM talk is a word that people often use. They say this is like talking about STEM. So this is an important thing, and it's something that, at least in what I've seen, and maybe others of you have some comments about this, but it's not really, I think, a natural thing that adults naturally do. Some adults probably do it pretty naturally, but adults seem to have a tendency to want to tell kids things or ask them questions, and not so much create the kinds of situations that this mom does with this little boy in this experiment. So next slide. All right, so we're talking about what we've been talking about all along, this verbal guidance and facilitation. It comes under many different roles. So it's interesting that when it's applied to STEM, it's called STEM talk, but early intervention, we would refer to this, as I said earlier, and many of you know already, as narrating or descriptive talking or things like that, much of which originates from work done at the Hannon Institute in Canada. So, but it's not exclusive to that. Many other people talk about this. So there's really three pieces to it, one of which is narrating, which I think is the easy piece. The second piece is, not that I think people do it, because I don't, but it's easy. And the second part of it is the vocabulary, which is introducing children to particular words that are particular STEM words, that are ones that later will provide like the verbal foundation for what they understand about STEM concepts. And then finally, introducing the opportunities for problem solving and trying to scaffold the child up into thinking about things besides just what's going on. So in that last video, that mom scaffolds him up by saying, well, I wonder what would happen if, or what is this happening here? So these are the things that I think are important to think about, and important right along with adaptations and along with thinking about how you can embed STEM into natural activities and routines, or create play activities is not as optimal as it's much easier. It's much easier to create a play activity than it is to think about how you would embed this. And it's much easier, for example, to show a parent how to do a particular water play activity than it is to think about embedding concepts with water into mealtime, or like the little boy washing at the sink, or into things like bath time or into swimming outside. It's harder to think about embedding it into routines and activities than it is to think about, oh, I can make an activity where this child builds a block. So the narration part of it then is basically these three things: narrate, use vocabulary, and introduce problem solving. Okay, next slide. All right, so if you think about water, these are some of the things that we would think about, that adults would provide language, but you could do this for anything. I just put one example in for water, but you could do it for what you would be doing for block building and engineering, or for patterns, or for counting, or for whatever. So there are always things that are action words that relate to an activity. Some activities have more opportunities for using temperature words. Almost all activities have opportunities for using size and for using color and for using shape a lot of times. And we can talk about weight and volume, and then cause and effect, what happens when, or even use of a tool, which is like introducing to children that something like a washcloth is a tool to clean a toy or to clean themselves, or using a tool like some of these bath sets have like little fishing nets that go with them, and you could that as a tool to have a child bring, an object to them that they can't reach. So these are the kinds of things, the vocabulary and the problem solving things that we want to try to get embedded into naturally occurring activities and routines, or into play activities also. Okay, next slide. Okay, so one last thing before we break into groups. We're going to break into groups, and think about, before we break into groups, think about, what kinds of things you think you would do to coach caregivers to embed STEM learning in naturally occurring activities and routines. Think about, in terms of people that you work with, parents, families that you might work with, what kind of things do you caregivers need to know? And what particular strategies might you use to coach caregivers? So I bring this up as not being the least important thing, because I don't think it is, but being like the fourth kind of thing that we have to think about. So we have to think about the activity, where it occurs, where it can be embedded, what the concepts are, the learning opportunities that can be embedded. How can we use adaptations to promote that, either access or use and manipulation of materials, or through instruction? What kind of things do we want to show adults to do to be able to facilitate children being able to learn things? And those are really the essential features that we have to figure on. But if you're an early intervention provider, if you're a caregiver in a child care program, you have to think about the fact that other people may also need to learn how to do this. This is particularly true for early intervention providers who may visit a family and a child, excuse me, 1 hour a week, or for a child that maybe doesn't even get that much. So we need to be able to think about how we what we do with caregivers. And many of you, if you are early intervention people, are probably in some way or another involved in one of the many coaching kinds of models that are being promoted in early intervention. You might be doing work with you and your state might be working with Lisa and Dathan around coaching, or you might be doing family guided routines-based coaching, or you might be doing the routines-based interview, or these various things that are occurring in early intervention. So then you would think about what strategies you would already know about coaching. So you're thinking about how to apply that coaching knowledge that you have already to what it is that you're going to show parents to do with STEM. So let's look at the next slide. And this is an early intervention provider. This little boy is about 2.5, almost 3. I think he actually is. And he has autism. And let's see what she does with him and his mother through remote, right? It's a remote early intervention session.
Next to, and then we can put this big one on top.
Whoa.
Put this next to, put orange next to blue. You can do it. Where did you put it? Listen to what Mommy's saying. Can you put blue and orange next to each other? Here are the what are they? What are they? Supports. Say here are the supports.
That's okay. So when you're just kind of telling him what they are, and then and you have another block to put on top.
We put this on top.
Tell him this is the beam.
This is the beam that goes on top, right? That's a great bridge. Did you build it? Yes. Are you like an engineer? Yes. Can you say that word? Engineer. Right. And what an engineer builds what? Towers, right?
Okay, nice job, Billy. You built a bridge. It's close to a tower. Do you want to put an animal on top of the beam?
We'll do train. Yes. There we go.
Oh, look. What animal is that?
A zebra. Very good.
And the zebra's on top of the bridge.
We put another animal.
Okay, so as I said, this is a remote early intervention session, and you can see 2 things here. You're looking at how the mom interacts with her son and what happens around the block activity. And I think you can see that she is not necessarily doing a lot of narration, but and he's not necessarily able to really manipulate these blocks that well, but they are what they are, and she's using them with him really effectively. The block part is effectively, but the early intervention person does a lot to kind of guide the mom and facilitate the mom, or coach the mom, whatever word you want to use, coach the mom to what it is that she might be doing with this little boy. And you can see how they use this activity to be able to then up the ante a little bit, because he makes the bridge with his mom's help, but the bridge gets built, and then they up the ante by changing this so that it's like, oh, could the animal be on top of the bridge, and what kind of animal is this? And they try to incorporate the language or the words for this particular bridge building activity, which would be that you have 2 supports and a beam. And this is a way of looking at how an early intervention provider might incorporate a bridge building activity into early intervention, show a parent how to be able to do this, and how to be able to not just make it be building with blocks, but also make it be a language activity as well. So there's probably more narration that the mom could learn, and other kinds of things like that could be done. But I think you can see that it is possible for early intervention people to be able to do this with families, and to be able to do it within the context of a remote visit. So it would be a little hard maybe to do this is a very structured play activity, and not in a naturally occurring thing, like they're not out in the backyard or whatever. But I do think that telecoaching, teleintervention, whatever, kind of limits sometimes all of the opportunities that you have. So you do have a play opportunity for play, not always optimal, but an opportunity for that. So let's go to the next slide, which is that we're going to put everybody in groups for about maybe 10 or 15 minutes, 10 minutes probably. And there are going to be 3 groups, one of which is a child with water and bubbles, which is this little boy that you've seen all along with the motor disabilities, one about diaper changing, and one about blocks. And within these 3 groups that are going to be led by Christine and Jessica and Suwen, within these 3 groups, what your goal is going to be is to be able to just think about what would you do? How would you do it differently if you would? What would be the adaptations? How could it be? What are the concepts that children are learning? And how might you teach parents how to be able to do something like this, these particular concepts, within daily activities or routines? So I don't know who's putting everybody in groups. So maybe we could finish up here very quickly. We only have a very few minutes. Are there any key ideas, Christine, you would like to share from your group?
Our folks loved the adaptation, of course, because we had the little boy with the homemade slings to help him his hand control. I think the most exciting, the most interesting thing that we talked about was just building context around what they were doing and using language as much as possible.
Okay. So how about you, Jessica?
Yeah, we had similar discussions around strategies for engaging the little guy a little better by potentially, they were blowing bubbles, and the nanny and the sister both had turns with the straw. And although the little boy might not have the oromotor skills to blow bubbles, giving him a straw and letting him touch and be more engaged or facilitating his interaction with the actual bubbles came up. We talked a lot about narrating and bringing in those STEM words and describing the bubbles as big and little and how they're filling with air, and incorporating STEM topics into the activity even more so, although they did a great job integrating counting in the video. We talked about some of the additional STEM concepts that they could talk about.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. And how about you, Swin?
Yeah, our group talked a lot about like additional STEM concept that could learn during the diaper change. Like you can do the peekaboo, up and down, and body parts, hard, soft, and wet and cold. And then also we talk about a little bit like how to engage families in these routines. And then people talk about follow the child's lead and expand the conversation. And also some people talk about this kind of diaper change activity. The STEM conversation can expand when child get older. We could have expand to the hand washing activity. So yeah, so we talk a lot about that, and it's a really fun conversation.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, Ching, I think you do the next part with people. If there's any questions or comments, we really appreciate your attending today. You could put your last questions or comments in the chat box. And then Ching will show you about the certificates and all.
Or Pip, I'll talk through it while you're getting your questions in there. We have a whole series of these professional development webinars. The first one was, I think, a month or so ago, and there's archived content available on our website, and we'll show you that website in just a second. We've got some upcoming ones, so check our schedule. We also are planning for our second annual virtual STEMmy Fest, which is a virtual experience cultivating inclusive STEM for families, practitioners, early interventionists, and anybody who is interested in learning about STEM for little people. We go birth to 5 or 6 or so, and there'll be all sorts of exciting things online. So keep eyes peeled for that. I think you can also get onto our wait list from our website. So you'll hear more information about that. Oh, it's in October 4th through 8th. We do have a survey. There's a link on the screen if you want to use that, or you can scan that code with your phone if you have it available. And they also just put it in the link, so you don't have to copy the silly Qualtrics link that they give you at the bottom of those. It's in the link if you'd like to fill that out for us. And we hope that you will stay in touch. When we flip over here, we've got our website is there at stemmy.fpg.unc.edu, and we are always posting stuff. We all are also on social media. We check out our postings on Facebook, on Twitter, and also on Pinterest. We're starting to get into Pinterest, and we make some pretty regular postings on a weekly basis for sure. A couple times a week, I think, is what we're up to now. So we're so excited to have you with us. Please feel free to, if there are any questions here. I haven't seen any pop up yet, but if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. I think there's a way to do that on the website, and check back because we've got lots of materials that we've put together. Okay, I think we're all set. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks so much for participating.
Thank you.